Okay, guys, I was checking on a chart today. 300 Winchester Magnum, 180 grain, compared to a 6.5 Creedmoor, 140 grain. And what I did is I took some of the highest ballistic coefficients for each caliber. And what you'll notice is the orange line there, that's the 300 Winchester Magnum, and the blue line is a 6.5 Creedmoor. The 6.5 Creedmoor is a very, very high ballistic coefficient cartridge, which means that even though it's a medium weight bullet, because of its high ballistic coefficient, it loses energy a lot slower than most other common bullets, like the 270, 30-06, 300 Win Mag, and stuff like that. And you can see it right here. Right here, you'll notice the 300 Win Mag starts out at a very, very high muzzle energy of 3,502 foot-pounds, whereas the blue, which is the 6.5 Creedmoor, starts out at 2,308 foot-pounds of energy. But notice how the Creedmoor, because it's got a high ballistic coefficient, it loses its energy gradually. But a 300 Win Mag, notice how the energy drops. And the more this line drops, you can see the gap between the 300 Win Mag and the 6.5 Creedmoor, the gap gets closer. What this means is that eventually the 6.5 Creedmoor is going to hit harder and have more energy than the 300 Win Magnum. Now, I know that's hard for some of you guys to take because you're thinking, well, how does a 180 grain bullet lose to a 140 grain bullet? Well, the answer is ballistic coefficient, sectional density, length of bullet, bullet design, like if it's got a bow tail, or how they design the bullet. So if the bullet has a high ballistic coefficient, it can outperform a heavier bullet because of that fact. So generally speaking, heavy bullets have a higher ballistic coefficient, but not always. Sometimes light bullets are designed very well to buck the air resistance. And you can see here the 6.5 Creedmoor. Eventually what's going to happen is this orange line is going to meet up with the Creedmoor. And that means that right around 600 yards, I'd say about 600 yards, maybe 650, what's going to happen is the little Creedmoor is actually going to be equal with energy to the 300 Win Mag, even though the Win Mag started out, 300 Win Mag started out at 3,502 foot-pounds, and the 6.5 started out at 2,308 foot-pounds. Even though it seems like the 300 Win Mag is going to hit harder at long range, it actually won't because it doesn't have the ballistic coefficient to keep that bullet efficient through the air. So what you'll notice down here is that at some point that 6.5 Creedmoor, even though it's only, say, like 140 grains, is going to hit harder than the mighty 300 Winchester Magnum. I know that's hard to take for a lot of people, but look, we're out at 500 yards, okay? And in 500 yards, look at how far that Win Mag has dropped in energy. It's continuing to drop in energy. And what's going to happen is these two are going to meet up at 600 yards. But that isn't the end of it. You still have another 4 or 5, 600 yards to go yet. Some guys shoot out at 1,000 yards. 1,000 yards, the 6.5 Creedmoor is going to have more energy than the 300 Win Magnum. If you look here, there's a big difference. So if somebody read this chart and they didn't analyze it properly, they'd say, well, look, the 300 Win Mag, it's got tremendous amounts of energy, and it surely is going to do better at 1,000 yards. Not so. The only way the 300 Win Mag is going to do better at long range is if it bumps up its ballistic coefficient, which means designing the bullet a different way, or a lighter bullet, so that it has that ballistic coefficient to buck the air resistance, so that it can do the same thing that the 6.5 Creedmoor is doing right here. And a lot of you guys, I know you have the 6mm Creedmoor, and there's a lot of new cartridges that have excellent ballistic coefficients that are doing so well at long range. And this is why there's so much hype about the 6.5 Creedmoor. And this is why sometimes people call it anti-gravity, because of the fact of how it performs so well at long range. But there's other cartridges that are coming out that are doing the same thing. Now, could we give a makeover to the 300 Win Mag, to the 308, to the 270 Winchester, the 7mm? Sure, we can give them makeovers. But the thing is that until they give it a makeover and have different bullet choices with higher ballistic coefficients, until they do something like that, the 6.5 Creedmoor is going to be beating a lot of these popular cartridges out to 1,000 yards or further, or the 6mm, or there's other cartridges that are out now that have very, very high ballistic coefficients and stuff. You know, the 300 PRC or whatever, and other types that they're coming out with. And once again, it's the ballistic coefficient. It's not always your energy from start that you have to look at. You have to look at the bullet from distance, not from close up. Because if you look at the bullet at distance here, you'll notice that the 300 Win Mag is really, really dropping. Okay? And if you take these two rifles, if they were both the same weight, same length of barrel, the 300 Win Mag is going to kick like crazy. It's going to kick like a horse. But the 6.5 Creedmoor isn't going to kick as much. So it's got less foot-pounds of energy as far as coming back into your shoulder. And depending on the weight of the rifle too, because there's a lot of 300 Win Mags that are very, very heavy rifles, but now they're selling lightweight 300 Win Mags for, gosh, under $500 now. And these little lightweight 300 Win Mags are going to kick you pretty good. So a lot of the recoil doesn't necessarily have to do with the cartridge, but with the weight of the rifle too. But in general, the 300 Win Mag kicks a lot harder than the 6.5 Creedmoor. So that's something you guys have to know too, is the kick and stuff. And the 6.5 Creedmoor is a pleasure to shoot, you know, and I've shot the 300 Win Mag before and much bigger cartridges than that. But the thing I'm trying to explain here to you guys is ballistic coefficient does matter when you get to a certain range. Like for instance, if we're just from here to say a few hundred yards, well, the 300 Win Mag, sure, it's got a lot more energy and punch, but not out at 1,000 yards. Once you get it past a certain point of yardage, that other bullet could catch up in energy, velocity, and all kinds of things. So you have to understand that about bullets. It's not always what you see from the start of the bullet. It's what you see at the end. You'll notice there's a big difference here between these two, and then you get out to 500 yards. Look at the difference. It's already starting to narrow to the point where the Creedmoor is catching up to the 300 Win Mag, which is on the bottom there, 1,700 foot-pounds, 63 at 500 yards. And the Creedmoor is 1,283. Now, there's not many yards more, many hundreds of yards more, where the 300 Win Mag is going to hang on. You know, eventually the Creedmoor is going to have more energy, the 6.5 Creedmoor. Even though at start, at muzzle, notice the big advantage that the 300 Win Mag has from the start there. So you're looking at, what is that, 23 to 33, that's 1,000 foot-pounds and 200 or something like that, more energy. But then when you get out here, what is it, like 450, 480 or something like that? You see what I mean? So it had a big advantage here at muzzle, but it didn't have a big advantage over here at 500 yards. So certainly it's going to narrow and narrow. The 300 Win Mag is going to keep dropping and dropping and dropping in energy, so that the 6.5 Creedmoor is actually better, say like at 700 yards and further. It's going to hit much harder. So that's something people have to know about rifles and energy and stuff. They always think it's the biggest bullet and the highest energy. Not always true. Not always true. In general, it could be for some comparisons, but if you have a high ballistic coefficient bullet that's medium weight, like the 6.5 Creedmoor, even though it's 140 grains, it'll walk all over a 180 grain bullet all day long if it's got a higher ballistic coefficient once it gets out to, say, like 6, 7, 800 yards. So you always want to check. You always want to check the whole entire chart and beyond that chart. So we can check beyond 500 yards very easy and find out what them energies are. But eventually the 6.5 Creedmoor is going to hit harder than a 300 Win Mag, and that's what impresses me so much about the 6.5 Creedmoor, is the fact that a smaller bullet like that where the rifle has very little recoil, can actually get out to 1,000 yards and actually hit harder than a 300 Win Mag. It's like, my gosh, that is impressive. But anyway, thanks for watching, you guys.